See you around the campfire.
Trailblazer Team coming to you with another fireside chat. And this time we're going to talk a little about RV maintenance and maintaining your RV. We got myself, Bill Burnett, and Rae-anne Graham with us again. And maybe we should start the topic of RV maintenance in the service department. Rae-anne, do RVs need maintenance?
Absolutely. It's one of the most overlooked things I think that we come across is people just not knowing exactly first of all, that their RV needs to be maintained, and second of all, what needs to be done and what kind of intervals it needs to be done at. People have gotten, you were mentioning earlier, people have gotten into the habit of maintaining their cars on a set schedule, but RVs, a lot of people still are unaware or unsure of what schedule they need to be doing the maintenance on. Mm-hmm.
So what are some of the sort of key things then that would qualify as RV maintenance items?
Well, really, the owner's manual says that there's two intervals, and I would take that to be the spring and fall, that you need to look at your RV to start with.
Start of the season and end of the season.
Yeah, and really that becomes, you summarize in the spring and you winterize in the fall. And there's obviously a lot more to maintenance than that. You're going to need to get up on the roof. You're going to have to walk around the unit. You're going to want to check your gas system periodically. There's a whole host of things, and the owner's manual kind of gets into a maintenance schedule, but it doesn't. It puts some of it on the individual suppliers of the different components, axle manufacturer and the tire manufacturer and such. But there's probably topics that we could talk about separately that would cover every different scenario, from your running gear to your outside maintenance. But I think one of the important messages that we need to get across is you need to become familiar with your unit and visit it once in a while. If you just put it in a storage yard and forget about it, you're more apt to run into some issues down the road. I think people that use their units seasonally probably get more accustomed to looking over their unit more often. Maybe it's the ones I think that sit in storage that we have to be a little concerned too.
Sure, that's right. Most of the other vehicles and pieces of equipment that you maintain throughout your daily life, they don't have such an off season that your RV does, that it may go into storage for 6, 7, 8 months, sometimes a year, where it doesn't get visited. So, and I know for me, one of the things that I see regularly, specifically taking trade-ins, one of the biggest maintenance items that I would suggest you keep an eye out for is water intrusion. Water intrusion is a big problem for RVs, and we get things like the really long roof warranties, like the 10 and 12-year roof warranties, that I think sometimes maybe they take some of that focus away from the user, because really right from the time your RV is new, there's no grace period that you don't need to do any maintenance. I think you need to really be in that habit of walking around the RV a couple of times a year right from new, especially getting up on the roof and checking all of your roof seals. Almost invariably, if there's water damage in an RV, most of the time where that water comes in is from the roof.
Well, definitely water and gravity is an RV's biggest enemy. Water is going to work its way in different areas, although we do know that water problems generally start from somewhere there's a hole in the unit, mm-hmm. whether it be a window, baggage door, a roof vent, or front or rear molding. Those are the areas that we're looking specifically at. And it's a matter of, again, spending a little bit of time with your RV once in a while, going over, having to walk around. A couple times a year, someone should be on the roof looking for problems up there, whether it be a cracked roof vent or some molding or caulking that's not done properly. So there's lots of areas to check.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the roof seals, they're going to deteriorate faster than, say, some of your side moldings and that sort of stuff. They're always exposed to the elements, always out there in the sun, nothing really protecting it from that sort of thing. Some of your side moldings are going to have a little bit longer life on their sealant because half the time it's in the shade, or, you know, depending on where the sun is, it's not always going to be hitting that side. But you need to remember to check the side moldings as well. They're equally as important to the roof. It's just the roof is likely going to need maintenance more often than the sides.
Right.
Well, the other one we see periodically, and I think to units, it's in the shop right now, where obviously a tree branch is dragged across the roof and it's snagged the rubber membrane on the roof, and there's a water penetration there. So again, that's one of the areas that you want to look at. You don't necessarily realize, you see that tree overhanging your way into the campground, and maybe you got a little closer to it than you thought. So that's one of those areas that if you're up there periodically, you're going to catch that pretty quickly, and it's an easy fix, but you don't want it to be left.
Yeah, in a situation like that, it's really not that catastrophic, the damage itself. It's the subsequent damage from the water intrusion that can be a problem.
Exactly.
And even if you catch it within the first few weeks, or even that within that first camping season, it's something that can be dealt with fairly quickly and easily. But once it's gone through a couple of freeze-thaw periods and snowfall and melts and stuff like that, it becomes a much bigger problem.
Yeah, and I think there's probably a whole topic that we could cover on that, a whole video. The other one that I hate to see is units on the side of the road. And units on the side of the road, whether it be tire, bearings, brakes, there's a number of areas there that can create problems. Even if you don't use your unit, over time, the grease in the bearings will break down and tires will deteriorate. So there's things you have to do there if you're going to be traveling, because we never want to see a unit on the side of the road. So it's a matter of checking the date codes on the tires and repacking bearings every couple of years. And there's a whole video that we could do just on running gear, but again, it's one of those things that you don't want to ignore, because we don't want to see you on the side of the road somewhere, because that can ruin a holiday too.
And you can get caught, the tires is a good example, you can get caught with 10-year-old tires that look brand new, but they're still 10 years old.
Yeah, exactly. And there's probably a video we can do on that, because all tires come with a date code that tells you when they were made, and we never recommend running a tire that's more than 10 years old, because you're headed to trouble. And in a lot of countries, you can't run tires over 7 years, but we generally find in our market that up to 10 years, and you better be replacing the tires no matter how good they look, because they're probably done.
Right.
Well, and you had mentioned the wheel bearings. At the beginning, I had mentioned getting into a service schedule like you would, say, oil changes on your car. Wheel bearing schedule is actually fairly similar to an oil change schedule, where generally the recommendation is every 8 to 10,000 kilometers the wheel bearings be repacked. And that's not just putting clean grease in, that is taking it apart, cleaning out all of the old dirty grease and putting all new grease in. A lot of these are coming with Easy Lube axles, where at the beginning of the season you can give it a quick squirt of grease to have fresh grease in there. But too many of those is not good for the bearings either. It can get gummed up and cause other issues on the brakes and that sort of stuff. So you need to make sure you're cleaning out that old grease as well as putting in your new clean grease. Exactly,
and actually the axle manufacturers have a great video online that shows people putting grease into the bearings, and that works great on a brand new setup with fresh seals and that. After a unit's been on the road for 2 or 3 years and it's got a few kilometers on it, the seals and everything's starting to wear out a bit. So if you start pumping grease in, then it's likely going to go right past that seal and into your brake linings and be even more expensive repair. So, it extends the service interval, but it doesn't replace the service of your bearings. So you do have to be careful there.
And what about an RV that hasn't seen 6,000 to 8,000 kilometers, that's been parked at a lot for most of its life, and now is going to do some traveling? Probably a wheel bearing repack in that case too, right? Yeah, the same as with an oil change. If you haven't had an oil change for a while, just sitting isn't good for it either. In that case, we recommend every 2 to 3 years. If your RV's been sitting at your seasonal lot for 3 years, but now you're ready to do some traveling, it probably needs a repack too. That grease is going to dry out and get dirty whether you're traveling or not.
Exactly, and that's something that the manufacturers of the lubricants say, that grease has a 5-year lifespan in most cases. So we know that if your unit's been sitting for 5 years, that the grease is probably given up then. And we also see it sometimes, and it's one of those telltale things, you'll see grease or oil on a rim of a unit, and sometimes if grease is subjected to super high heat, it'll break down, so the oils will come out of it, and then it'll go past the seals, and that's where you'll see a dirty wheel that's covered in oil. Well, it's likely that unit needs some service because
Right.
somewhere along the line that's got too hot and the grease has broke down either from age or from heat.
Right. I think we probably covered as much as we can in a fireside chat. If you've got questions about RV maintenance, go ahead and drop them in the comments. We'll get to all of them, or reach out to us through trailblazerrv.com. And it sounds like probably look for another video coming up on a similar topic, or maybe tires or bearings specifically. And thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll see you around the campfire.